becoming a parent can be a very long journey. For Elizabeth Katkin, it took 7 miscarriages, 10 IVF cycles, 9 years, and $200,000 to solve her fertility issues.
It's a long and big journey, but for Elizabeth, it also took a trip to Moscow and ignoring everything her fertility doctors in the U.S. and UK were telling her. Her book, Conceivability, What I Learned Exploring the Frontiers of Fertility, is partly a memoir and partly a how-to, how to conceive and carry a baby to term. Elizabeth joins us now. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being here with us, friend. What a journey to talk about one. So thank you for sharing your life with us. The fact that you had to leave the country to conceive, how in the world did you make that decision?
So I'll, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. I'm so happy to have the opportunity to share a little bit of my story with you and your listeners and viewers. It's not quite as crazy as it sounds. We didn't just get up and decide to leave the country, but my husband and I had moved to London for his job, and we were both working in London. And when we moved to England, I was pregnant the first time after what I thought had been a long time trying, but now it seems like a nanosecond. And I had my first miscarriage in London, and obviously had to see doctors in London because that's where I was when I miscarried. And then I kind of got in this cycle of consulting with doctors in the US and spending a whole lot of money to fly home to see doctors here because that's what I knew and that's what I was used to. And sometimes it takes an outside point of view. It was really the new friends I made and some colleagues and even some clients who I'd shared what I was going through with, who started asking me why I was coming back and why I was stuck in what I now call like the Anglo-American perspective. And it was really living in Europe and having other people open my eyes and say, you know, why aren't you staying here? It's a lot less expensive and the success rates are a lot higher. And that was big news to me. So it was really circumstance that led me overseas. And also what led me to want to share my story because I realized how fortunate I am to have been able to see doctors in several different countries. And I got so many different perspectives that I wanted to share with other women and families.
I think we're beginning to realize why the New York Times refers to you as the Jason Bourne of fertility patients, your relentless quest to give birth to 2 children. So how did this affect you? And when I say you, I mean not only your body, but your mental health and your marriage?
Yeah, it's not in good ways for the most part. It's a tough journey. And I'll say that the fertility part, taking the drugs, the IVF, the constant being in a habit trail, trying to succeed, took a really big toll on my body, mostly because these cycles rely so heavily on medication. And then the miscarriages, interestingly, they're a little bit less of a physical toll, but a much bigger mental toll. I mean, it's really devastating. I'm sure you have people in your audience who've lost a baby, and especially when you've had a hard time conceiving, when you get over that hurdle and you're pregnant, you think you've made it. And that loss is so difficult. But the silver lining in it was that it really brought my husband and I so much closer together. I mean, we definitely went through difficult times and didn't always see eye to eye, but it so much strengthened our marriage. And I feel like when you go through something so challenging, you form a bond that, in our case, has been unbreakable.
It's amazing how transparent you've been with us, and I appreciate that. I was talking to some girlfriends, and I've had so many friends deal with the loss of children and deal with the hardship of trying their best to get pregnant. I mean, it is like, I just didn't realize it. I was so ignorant to this journey that so many people have. So if you were talking to any one of my friends or any ladies in the room, what advice would you give them, especially if they're having similar ordeals like your 9-year journey?
Yeah. So my biggest advice is really to ask as many questions as possible and to try to be open. I mean, my mantra through all of this has become that information is power. And, you know, unfortunately, the numbers of people in this country trying to conceive, it's huge. One in 6 couples have trouble. And a lot of these clinics just have standard protocols, and like you go in the sausage machine and you get the protocol. Like, I would encourage you to tell your friends and to tell women out there, ask a lot of questions and find out exactly what's wrong with your body and exactly what treatment works for your body. I wasted a lot of time doing things that weren't necessarily appropriate for my problems. And it's time, it's money, and it's toll on the body. And so I think the quicker you can narrow it down and personalize your treatment, and find a doctor you can really communicate with. It's so important to take charge of your own fertility. And, you know, it's something, I have a website, I consult, but I also put out a lot of free information, and I actually have some checklists of questions for women to ask their doctors if they're not quite sure what questions to be asking. But I think the quicker you can hone in on the problem, the quicker you're going to find a route to success.
Happily, Elizabeth, you do now have 2 children. Was there ever a time throughout this ordeal when you just thought it's too much, we're giving up?
Very briefly. I think my husband had that time a lot more than I did. I'd kind of get down a little days or weeks and say, okay, I'm going to rally. But there were absolutely times that I thought, you know, I may not have my own children. And when I say in my book, I left no stone unturned, I really mean it. And we were looking at surrogacy, we were looking at adoption, we were looking at trying on our own. We were sort of looking at every route at the same time because it seemed so daunting. And it's also, I had a number of obstacles that we don't have time to discuss, but you know, one thing I say in my introduction is that if I can have a baby, really anybody can. And I truly believe that. I think that it's hard to keep the faith, but if having a child is what you want, you're lucky to live in a modern era, and there is a way to do it. You just have to find the way that works for you.
That's good words to leave us with. The book is Conceivability, What I Learned Exploring the Frontiers of Fertility. Elizabeth Catkin, thank you so much for just sharing you with us. We appreciate your wisdom. Please come back anytime you are a friend of the show now.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me.